As we continue to think about a Biden-Harris administration, should we also be thinking about new taxes? And are the good folks at Amazon listening to your conversations? Maybe they are, and you actually gave them permission to do so. Plus, that cup of coffee at Starbucks may have just gotten a bit more expensive, considering AOC and Elizabeth Warren want you to pay for your barista's liberal arts degree. These topics and more today on the BizPo Show. Welcome to the BizPo Show, where business and politics collide in a way that is both enlightening and, we hope, entertaining. I'm Seth, Denson, coming to you from our studios in Dallas, Texas, and I'm joined by my good friend Dan Geltrude in New York City. Dan, good to see you, buddy.
Hey, Seth, I am so excited about the BizPo Show because we are going to put business and politics together. We're not going to run away from those topics. We're going to unite those topics, and we're going to break it down. We're going to simplify. We're going to analyze in a way that everyone can get engaged with these topics. And when you think about how business and politics really go together, there's no better example than when you're talking about the tax code and how taxes work, because when you have taxes, businesses are going to react, and they're going to react significantly. And I think those kind of topics, Seth, are easy for us to break down for everybody. But I'm going to tell you what's a challenge for me, and that's figuring out what the heck you're saying, because I got to tell you, you talk a little funny.
Man, I sound normal. I don't know what you're talking about. I sound just like my mama and my daddy sound. No, listen, I think it's interesting as we start to think about, the United States, right? And to the point you just made, business and politics, whether we like it or not, those two are conjoined. But they're not just conjoined at the federal level, but at the state level. And some of the topics I think that we'll probably get into are things like what's life up in New York City for you versus what it's like here in Texas for me. I'll tell you from a business climate perspective, it certainly seems to think that, or at least all evidence is pointing to the fact that we got some things figured out down here in Texas, at least if you're looking at Oracle, Tesla, Charles Schwab, and many of the other companies that are moving our direction.
Hey, you certainly got that right. I got to tell you, there's a lot of states in the New York metropolitan area that just aren't getting it. And look, that's what we need to do. We got to talk about what's going on all around the country, because literally sometimes it feels like it's multiple countries, not one United States.
Well, that's very true. Well, listen, you teased it at the top, so let's talk about it for a minute, and let's kind of maybe kick things off as we start to think about a President-elect Biden or Harris, whichever one you want to say it is.
That's right.
But in their administration, this does seem to be becoming more probable. So if you look at the markets seem to be reacting in a way that isn't all that erratic. And they have kind of somewhat mixed emotions. But listen, Joe Biden has already come out and stated that he wants to raise taxes on those making more than $400,000 a year. Now, I have a problem with that, because I think there's two things to consider here, right? There's direct tax impact and then indirect tax impact. And Dan, nobody better to take this topic on than America's accountant. Tell me what your thoughts are.
All right, so America's accountant is going to deviate just a little bit here, and I'm going to talk about the political side of this. So I'm going to start with this, Seth. When a politician is campaigning and they say they're going to raise taxes, believe them. That's the one time that you should absolutely believe a politician on the campaign trail. But here's where I kind of move away from the believability factor. Because when you're saying, well, we're just going to raise taxes on those big, bad, rich people and those terrible corporations that, of course, give people jobs, those groups, well, they don't pay their fair share. So we're going to go after just them. Everybody else, you're going to be fine. Well, here's the problem with the whole fair share argument. And let's go right by the numbers. And here's where America's accountant comes in. Seth, do you know that the top 1% of earners pay 40% of the federal income taxes? And then you have almost 50% of the people that pay no income tax at all. So I'm missing it here as far as the fair share. If 1% is paying almost half, and half the people are paying nothing, there's something wrong here, but not the way the politicians are explaining it.
Well, but that's the whole thing, right? I mean, there's one thing between when you start looking at what is reality, and then there's one thing about what you hear as messaging or talking points. And to your point, listen, I run a business, Dan. You run a business. We all have to operate on a budget. Businesses do. Federal governments don't, but businesses do. And so as we're thinking about as I start to contemplate what my budget's going to look like at over the next year, kind of like a quarterback needs to throw the ball where the receiver is going to be, not necessarily where the receiver is, right? I have to start thinking about what is the tax implication going to be. And if I'm starting to think about how taxes are going to impact my overall P&L, that then is going to trickle into my thought process for wage increases, adding that new staff, maybe moving into a new vertical or expanding the business. All of those things begin and end with one certainty: taxes.
And let me tell you something more about you kind of mentioned about things trickling down. Let me kind of venture into your part of the country. I think there's a lot of oil companies down there in Texas.
It's oil.
Right?
It's oil, man. It's not oil. It's oil.
Well, you say tomato, I say tomato, whatever the case is. I say oil. So you got a bunch of oil companies down there, and those are the bad guys, right? So Biden and Harris, Biden, they turn around and they say, well, we got to get those bad guys. We got to increase their taxes. Okay. So they put a tax on those companies. Now, those oil companies have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. Remember your 401k, everybody, right? So they have a responsibility to keep their companies profitable. So what happens? They're going to have to increase the price on their product. Now, when they do that, Seth, who's paying more? The consumer, the end user. And we feel that when we go to the pump. And what that does, Seth, it creates a very bad word, in my opinion, and that's inflation, because inflation is just like a tax. It reduces how much you take home. So how do we get product across the country and everywhere? We need to use fuel. So prices go up everywhere on everyone, not just the rich and not just the corporations.
Man, that's a perfect example. And the reality is, and you teased it just a moment ago, you said trickle. I know that this is hard for the people on the left to understand. Trickle economics is real. I don't know about you, but as I think about all the jobs that I had, both growing up, early on in my career, I never got one of those jobs from somebody that was also, in the food line, right? I mean, these are people that have put stuff on the line. They have risked their businesses and their livelihoods to start businesses. I've worked for a lot of small business owners over my career, and even corporations. Both have one key thing in common. If they're not profitable, I don't have a job. And so if we start to think about isolating, taxes on the wealthy only, or those making over $400,000 a year, the reality is you're talking about most small business owners, as I mentioned before. If you tax them, that's squeezing that balloon. That air has to be moved around, and likely who really gets squeezed? The middle and lower class.
Yeah, they ultimately do, Seth. But let's talk about those business owners and what they're going to feel if that Senate election down in Georgia, the Democrats take both of those seats. Because if they do, taxes are going up. And they've already talked about, and we've heard about, that in some states, like where I am in New Jersey and New York, at the highest levels, you're going to talk about people paying in the 60% and up in income tax. Do you realize what that means? That means you're working more than half the year, January, let's say, until close to August, and you haven't made a penny. You have worked that entire time to to give all that money to either the state or the federal government. And to me, that's the tipping point. And that's why, Seth, we are seeing migration all over the country between states, like where I am in New York City, down to where you are in Dallas, because people are saying enough is enough. And remember this, Seth, this country was founded on a tax revolt, and it can happen again.
All great points, my friend. And I'll say this. All you folks from up north, you're welcome. Lone Star State's big, and we'll welcome all of you. You just leave those politics back at home, all right? Don't bring those things with you. Maybe some of that pizza, though, right?
We'll bring that for sure.
Hey, all great points. Hey, when we come back, is Jeff Bezos listening into your conversations? Learn more on the BizPo Show. Coming right back.
A renowned financial expert, university professor, and founder of Geltrude & Company, Dan Geltrude has discovered how to align financial triumph and positive karma. For those who truly want to experience financial success in all facets of their lives, America's Accountant provides the answers to many of life's financial challenges. Throughout this candid, easy-to-understand book, you will learn how you can achieve positive financial karma. Positive Financial Karma is available now on Amazon.
Welcome back to the BizPo Show. Recently, Amazon released their new Sidewalk program. As part of their safety suite, this program is meant to take information from Ring doorbells and share data across their network of doorbells using various Amazon devices like Alexa as the bridge. Amazon states that this is to help support local law enforcement, but for a company that started out selling books and is now involved in nearly every aspect of our lives, can we trust them that this is as far as they're going to go? Dan, I will tell you, I consider myself an Amazon super user, man. Every time Jeff Bezos and his crew come out with a new toy, guess what? I want it. Amazon has made my life easy. During the pandemic, it has been a godsend to get things delivered straight to my door. But are we venturing now into maybe a little bit of too far a territory when it comes to now facial recognition software and knowing who's coming in and out of my house and all that other good stuff? What's you?
Yeah, well, look, I am addicted to technology as much as the next person. And I think we've gone so far right now in this new world that we're living in that there's really no going back. Now, I don't know if you've watched this documentary called The Social Dilemma, but it's a scary thing. And the reason why it's scary, it's not just that these companies like Amazon and Google and Facebook and some of these others are kind of invading our privacy. They are actually able to pattern how we think. Now, think about how powerful it is, Seth. If you know what someone else is thinking, that's just to start. But then they actually have the ability to manipulate what we do, literally mind control. And that's why I think we are starting to step over the line here, Seth, but I just don't know how we turn back. I mean, can you say, well, I don't want any part of technology going forward?
No, I think, listen, technology is part of life now, right? That's not going anywhere. At least not unless we end up in some Hollywood movie played out in real life scenario. But here's the other thing. Hollywood actually is playing out in real life. If we think back over the last 20 years, there have been so many movies made about those that are able to manipulate or hear what other people think, or you know, Enemy of the State, right? A movie that came back a number of years ago. And I thought of that movie when I heard about this new Sidewalk program, because effectively what it's doing is taking Ring doorbells, which I have one. I get it. They're a great piece of technology to have to understand who's at your door. But what it's doing is it's looping all these things together from one Ring doorbell to the next using using various Amazon devices as the gateway bridge, we'll call it, to send the signal if there's a gap. These are 900 megahertz signals that are already being sent out. So we're talking about potentially over half a mile that these signals can go. And the idea here is safety and security. Isn't that the way to win the hearts and minds of people? Is say, we're here to keep you safe. But is that the end goal? Because as more and more time goes on, we're hearing about companies gathering this information to do what you just said, Dan, which is really to sell it, to use it in marketing. And if we think about Amazon as a whole, what don't they already know about most Americans, right? If you have Amazon television, they know what you like to watch. If they have Amazon Music, they know what you like to listen to. If you have Amazon Pharmacy, they know what prescription drugs you're getting. If you have Amazon Alexa, they know what questions you like to ask. Literally, there is nothing that these folks don't know. And quite frankly, we only have ourselves to blame.
Well, we do, Seth. We're doing this by choice, other than the fact, and this is what I really don't like, with these things like Sidewalk, you're automatically in and you have to opt out. Now, I don't go for that at all. That, to me, should be something that you have to select. You want that kind of safety, or you think you're getting that kind of safety, then you opt in. But it's not that way. You are stuck in it. Now, let me say this. I am not a big fan of the government being all in our business and the government being involved in every aspect of our lives. But what's interesting now, and I support, is that the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, right now, as we speak, is having the 9 technology companies, which includes Facebook, Google, and Amazon, and others, right? They're going to have them come in and explain, how are you gathering this data and what are you doing with it? That is the type of transparency that we need to have. Now, it's one thing if we have Russia, China, North Korea listening in on us for nefarious purposes, and I understand that, and we're probably doing the same thing to them, Seth. So I get that. But that's a little different than American companies doing this to us. That, to me, is just crossing the line.
Well, listen, you bring up two good points there. The first one being the auto opt-in, right? I mean, that's my big concern here. It's not like Amazon took out billboards for this. I mean, they weren't hiding behind it either, so kudos to them for that. But it's not like I got a notification like, hey, guess what? We're now opting you into this program. Here are the steps you need to go through if you want to opt out. You were automatically opted in. It took, someone on my staff coming to me and saying, hey, by the way, did you hear about this? For me to realize it. And that's part one of the concern. But part two is what you just mentioned. It's so few companies having so much information. We are just on the heels of election where there's a lot of questions about influence. Were these technology companies able to influence the election because of their ability to take information and disperse it how they saw fit? That is a huge concern as we start to think through the future. So few of these companies having access to so much information and so much control of information is terrifying.
And that is where I think we need to go in this discussion ultimately. So if these big tech companies know what we're thinking, and then they make the leap to actually be able to kind of rewire our brains, and that's no exaggeration, where they start to rewire how we think, and then that ultimately leads to what lever people are pulling in the ballot box, right? And then based upon that, who gets elected, and then based upon that, who makes the laws, and then ultimately who benefits from those laws of the people that these technology companies have pre-selected, Seth, right?
That's right. Listen, it's as Ben Franklin once said, and of course I'm paraphrasing, that those who would give up liberty for temporary safety deserve neither. We'll be right back. As we teased at the top of the show, progressives are ready to spend more of your money. Yes, recently AOC and Elizabeth Warren have come out in support of canceling college debt. Well, they've set the threshold of this cancellation at $50,000. Dan, is this just another move towards a nanny state?
There is so much at play with this, Seth. You and I can talk about this one for hours, particularly because I actually am a professor at Montclair State University. So I'm interacting with students and have these discussions about student debt all the time. Now, look, student debt is serious. We have almost $1.6 trillion of outstanding student debt out there. I mean, that's an obscene amount of money. So we have to ask the question, Seth, how did we get here? Now, there's a number of factors. One of which is we have to talk about the financial responsibility of the student and their parents. They have to understand return on investment. How much money am I going to spend on an education? And am I going to have the ability to pay it back? And what's that return on my investment? What's my benefit? The other thing about this is I believe the lenders have acted in a predatory fashion. They're out there just throwing money at these kids, and they're saying, oh, don't worry about it. You pay it back later, without any regard as to whether they're going to have the ability to get over the hump of paying that debt and being able to make a living. Because Congress set up in 1976 that you cannot get out of student debt virtually for any reason, including bankruptcy. So there's no getting out of this, Seth.
Well, that's right. And I think there's a couple of points that need to be made here. First of all, the point you made early on in the 70s, but also looking at the 80s when the government really started backing these loans, right? What happens when Uncle Sam gets involved in any aspect of business? The cost goes up. If we look at what tuition has done since Uncle Sam's gracious involvement in this loan program, it's more than doubled. And when we start to break down, we'll call it canceling of debt, right? That's a key word that isn't actually true. Nothing is getting canceled. It's just getting paid for by someone else. Who's not losing out? The universities, the lenders. Who is losing out? The taxpayers. At the end of the day, canceling it means just that you and I and taxpayers are actually footing the bill for this. And that is the greater challenge here when AOC and Elizabeth Warren start talking about canceling. Nothing's getting canceled.
Seth, what is more expensive than a free education? How about that one? Because nothing is free. Politicians like to sell it that way, and that's simply not the case. Look, somebody's going to have to pay for this. And why should it be the people who, let's say, took out student loans, paid them back, had two jobs, and did whatever they had to be able to pay it back? Or what about those people that didn't go to college at all? Essentially, they quite frankly got the short end of the stick. That's not how this should work. And you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about the costs here, because there really was no cap or no control over what universities could charge, because all this loan money was being thrown at the students. So, of course, they took it, and that's not the way to act responsibly. And one more point here, I'm putting on my America's Accountant cap here, is that when someone is paying for college, they're paying with after-tax dollars. But you know what? These universities are nonprofit organizations, and they don't have to pay tax on what they receive.
That's right. And so as we start to think about this, I think that we absolutely need to have a conversation about colleges and what they charge and predatory lenders like you were mentioning earlier, and who's really footing the bill here. This needs to be part of a very transparent and open conversation, but it needs to be part of an entire conversation where we do start looking at people who need help getting out from under certain levels of debt. Maybe they went to college for a semester and it wasn't their thing, or they had some catastrophic issue happen back at home and they need some help. The greatness about America is that we're there to help our fellow citizens when we need it the most. But to set these caps at $50,000 and to quote unquote say that we're just canceling them, Man, that is just ludicrous. And we do need to have a conversation about it, but it needs to be a broader conversation than just forgiveness on the back of the taxpayers.
Let me tell you what's happening right now. There's some class action lawsuits with kids and their parents against the universities. And you know what they're saying? We paid for in-person education and we're getting cyber education here. That's not what we paid for. It wasn't for online. So they got this lawsuit going on. And I want to put this final thought out there on this topic, Seth. If the universities don't get their act together and figure out how to provide more competitive pricing on their education, and it's going to be online, and not that they've done a bad job, but they're charging too much, watch out for Amazon University. You heard it here first. Amazon U, I don't know how their football team will be, but they'll provide education at a very competitive price.
Hey, man, I get it. Amazon, there they were again. We talked about them just a moment ago. We're talking about them again. But hey, if there is one good thing about Amazon, there's a lot of good things. But if there's one really good thing, competition. Competition drives down the market. I couldn't agree more with you, my friend. Hey, when we come back, Dan and my final thoughts.
Seth Denson's The Cure, a blueprint for solving America's healthcare crisis, has been hailed as a must-read by conservatives and liberals alike. If you're seeking true healthcare solutions without political or monetary bias, you'll find them in The Cure. Seth Denson provides a beacon of hope for an industry drowning in a sea of noise. Straightforward and results-driven, the message in The Cure provides the path we need to fix the U.S. healthcare and health insurance systems. The Cure is available at SethDenson.com, Amazon, and your local retailer.
Welcome back to the BizPo Show. Each week, Dan and I will pick a topic that's on our minds. These topics will typically be something that we're passionate about, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, but either way, that's okay. So Dan, this week, what's your final thought?
Let me tell you what's on my mind as far as my passion goes, and that's college football. There is nothing better to me than when you get into this fall season, and now things are getting a little bit on there, but college football, man, that is what it's all about for me, and specifically my Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, we're not exactly having the season that I would have liked to, but look, given where we are with a pandemic, to get any little bit of college football, even if I can't be there in the stands, is something to get excited about and moving towards normalcy for a change. So, Seth, a lot of people have been impacted by COVID and they've gotten sick, and unfortunately some people have died. And I just say, if there's something out there that can bring us a little happiness, some entertainment, and to me there's nothing better than college football, then so be it, because there will be a light at the end of the tunnel at some point for all of us.
Man, for you, it's your Nittany Lions. For me, it's my Texas Longhorns. We didn't quite have the season we'd like to have either, but nonetheless, it was a season. And it was great to get to sit down on Saturday mornings and watch some of the games. It did bring back some of that sense of normalcy, and that was a real blessing. Well, listen, for my final thought this week, I don't know if you saw it, but recently 3 of our former presidents, Clinton, Bush, and Obama, all came out, not only supporting the upcoming vaccine, but also stating that they themselves would take it. They even went so far as saying they would go on live TV to air their inoculation. Listen, I recognize that there is a lot of concern over these vaccines, and many, even some on the right, are saying that they just won't take it. Either they don't trust it, or they don't feel like they need to because the mortality rate for COVID-19 is so low. Here's my take. Everyone loves to talk about being patriotic. As a matter of fact, that specific word may be one of the most overused adjectives in the English language. Experts, and I'm talking about nonpartisan ones that have no political agenda whatsoever, are saying that to rid the world of COVID, we must have 60 to 80% herd immunity. This means that you've either already contracted COVID or you've been vaccinated for it. In short, here's my take. You taking a bold stand not to take the vaccine doesn't make you patriotic. Your taking it does.
Seth, I couldn't agree more with what you said, and I really support those three American presidents getting together on television to take the vaccine. And I'm going to throw my hat into the ring and say America's accountant will join them in taking the vaccine on TV.
Man, I'm with you there, brother. I would do the same thing. Likely you and I will be in the back of that line, and that's okay. We want those that need it the most to get it first. But when it comes my turn, I'll step up to the plate with you. Well, that does it for this week's edition of the BizPo Show. We hope you enjoyed it and certainly appreciate your tuning in. We hope you'll tell your friends about the show and be sure to tune in again next week. From Dallas, Texas, I'm Seth Denson.
And from New York City, I'm Dan Geltrude. Good night.